Welcome to the Investor Empowerment Series radio show, empowering your real estate investing with techniques, opportunities, and information, minus the BS and sales pitches. Now, please welcome the host of the Investor Empowerment Series, Joe Mueller, from the Tough as Nails Investment Syndicate, Joe Mueller.
Hey, you're back again to the Investor Empowerment Series radio show. This is episode number 58. Today I want to talk real quick about finding deals in your spare time. I know that's going to make it sound pretty easy, but I hear a lot of communication back from newer and experienced real estate investors that are getting frustrated in this type of a market, where we're seeing prices that continue to escalate in appreciation, as well as a lot of competition in the investment market. Real estate investing market. What I will say is typically during the fall and winter months of the year is when most investors, I should say most, in my opinion, there are more deals to be had. More opportunity has a tendency to present itself at the right price, because if you're dealing direct with a seller, for example, they're going to be more motivated at that point, since they missed the spring and the summer market, and maybe they have to move because of a job transfer or because of whatever reason, and they're like, oh crap, well, you know what, we need to get rid of this house. Those exist. Also along the lines of the same type of situation with having opportunities in fall and winter, the demand goes down, hopefully the supply remains the same, which tells me the prices are going to drop, right? So there's more opportunities to pick up properties at better discounts, because there's just not as many buyers out there in the fall and winter months, especially, January and February, for example. And right after that's typically when the spring market starts to kick in again. So all you out there that are looking to get into real estate investing, or get another property under your belt, or get your first property, start considering getting your financing, getting your private money, getting your cash, getting your funding lined up in general, because in the next few months here, you're going to start to see more opportunity present itself. And not only is it a great time to buy for a great deal, it's a great time to buy because if you're going to do something for like a fix and flip or even a fix to rent, the best time to do either of those and put them on the market either as a retail sale after a flip or as a rental property that you want to put on the market to get new tenants for is always in the spring, right? So typically the busiest real estate market times of the year is between, like April to June in general. That's at least what I see in my experience doing this in the Chicagoland area. That said, finding deals in your spare time. What I was getting to, a lot of people come up with roadblocks where they're saying, I just can't find a good deal at the right price. I don't know why, I just can't find anything, or my broker sucks, or whatever. I need to meet some more wholesalers. I mean, all those things could potentially be true. What I wanted to emphasize in the podcast today is, put some ownership on yourself, take some of that responsibility for yourself, and find some deals on your own. I'm not even going to talk about off-market stuff. I'm not going to talk about direct mail or campaigning to motivated sellers. I'm just saying what's right in front of you. A prime example is last week I was at home with my kids who had to get them off the bus, and they were upstairs doing their thing, playing with their toys. So I was down in my home office, which is actually typically hijacked and commandoed by my wife. But I had the opportunity to sit down at the desk that I haven't sat in a long time, because she's always in there doing her thing. But I was like, all right, well, I don't know. I'm going to go on the MLS, and I'm just going to see what's going on in some of the market areas around me that I like to buy in. So I was looking at multi-units. I was looking at single families. And I'm just looking at pricing. I'm looking at what's going on. I'm studying the market. I'm doing my homework. So let's call it this. When you're trying to find deals in your spare time, start doing your homework. Whatever you have access to as a medium to view properties, evaluate properties, things like that. Start doing that when you have nothing else going on. That'll help prepare you for when the right opportunity does present itself. And I don't mean to repeat myself, because I'm sure I've said that before, but I just want to hit that message home, because I'm going to tell you what happened this particular day. So I was scheduled to meet a contractor that evening at 5 p.m. to go over one of the recent properties that I'm working on. And this was at about 3 o'clock or so. I'm sitting at the computer. So I start looking through the MLS. I'm looking on the market. I find a property priced in one of the suburbs right around me that happens to be the same area I just bought a property, which I was going to that evening at 5 p.m. And I see the price point at $110,000. And I thought, 110? Well, I mean, that's not a great deal, but I mean, I don't know. Let's run the numbers. So it's a 3-bedroom, 1-bath with a detached 2-car garage, decent part of town. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, well, let's see here. I ran all the numbers, and even if I paid full price for the property and had a 20% down payment, or 25% with a commercial loan, amortized over 25 years, it was cash flowing at like $400 a month. And that was assuming it didn't need any repairs. So I'm like, all right, well, this might be an opportunity. I had not seen the house yet. I just looked at pictures that I found online. Well, I submitted an offer on it for $85,000. I thought, well, I haven't even seen the thing yet. Let's throw in an offer. Numbers work great at 85, plus that builds in some repair costs, 10, 15,000 if needed. So I did that, submitted it to the broker, got confirmation he received it. I'm like, all right, that took me all of about 10 minutes to do. Now, granted, I'm a licensed real estate broker, so it's a little more simpler for me to submit an offer with my own pre-approvals, proof of funds, things like that. It takes me minutes, where it might take you a little bit longer because you'll have to contact your broker, who should be somebody from Tanis Group Realty, might add, to get that offer submitted for you. Now, that said, I put that one in the hopper. Then I'm online. I'm looking at some of these auction websites. There's your Xome, which is XOME. I'm looking at HUDHomestore.com. I'm looking at Hubzu. I'm looking at auction.com. And by the way, if any of you are unfamiliar with what I'm talking about right now, just shoot me a quick email, joe@tanisgroupllc.com, and I'll walk you through some of these websites, because these are available to the public. You can bid on these yourself with or without a broker. The brokers obviously can assist you with that process. So if you've never done it before, I'd recommend definitely contacting me or a real estate broker in your market to help you out with it. But so back to the point, I'm on Hubzu.com. I see there's a live auction going on online right now. It's about to end in 15 minutes on a property in an area that I'm familiar with. Again, another suburb of Chicago, not the same town that I was referring to before. So this is 30 miles away from that place. But I'm looking at the pictures and I'm like, okay, well, my goal with buy and hold is if I can be all in with repair costs for $100,000, I'm a happy camper. Because what I've determined is, based on what the rents are for the area of the northwest suburbs of Chicago, a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, somewhere in that, you're going to get a range somewhere between $1,200 and $1,500 a month. And if you can be in with repair costs for $100,000, that typically will sustain somewhere between a $350 to $500 in cash flow, depending on what you rent it for. If you do a rehab on it, you're always going to be able to rent for more, based on the fact that it's the nicest house that's on the market, right? So I always push anything I've rehabbed to rent, like a nice rehab. I've always pushed those values up on the rental side, just like you would as a flip. I mean, typically a brand new flip can command a little bit more higher price than the house next door that may be remodeled. Same model, but this one's been remodeled and yours has been recently, totally rehabbed. You're going to be able to command a higher price. I mean, there's no set percentage on that, but I would say somewhere, at least 10% more, maybe more. That said, I find this house in this suburb that I've also invested in the past. It's got a live auction. I'm sitting through it. I'm watching it. No one's bidding. I'm like, whatever. I'll throw a bid in. So I threw a bid in somewhere in like the $70,000 range. Long story short, 10 minutes later, it gets driven up to like, I don't know, $87,000, probably a little bit higher than I would want to pay. I had backed out already at that point, but I'm just watching it. The auction finishes at a price somewhere in that high 80s range. My last bid was in the mid to high $70,000 range. And again, I had not seen this property. I don't know what type of work it needed. I'm looking at pictures. I can see that there's a lot of primer on the walls. There's a ceiling that's been torn out, so it's telling me maybe there's a mold situation. I could also see it was in a floodplain. Interestingly enough, this house backed up to a channel that fed into one of the larger chain of lakes areas up north in northern Illinois, which is a popular, recreational area. So I'm like, okay, a little more advantage to this property because you can hypothetically maybe put a boat in and, go out to the main lake and play around with your friends and do some water skiing or whatever. So I had a little bit higher of an interest in it for that reason, because that's going to create more value. Now, recently we had this big flood out here in Chicago. I don't know if you are from Chicago, you know exactly what I'm talking about, but the Fox River, went beyond flood stage, and, houses were getting swept underwater and things like that. So I was looking at Google Maps trying to determine the distance between the channel itself and the house. I'm like, okay, it's already in a floodplain. Does it flood? I pulled up an old listing from the previous owner prior to them getting foreclosed on. And one of the advantages of the internet these days is all this data is still out there. So I had to, sift through some stuff on the Google machine, but I was able to find an old listing as well as the documents for the sale. The seller's disclosure, which is a document required in the state of Illinois. So when the lady tried to sell the house prior to it going to foreclosure, she had it listed as a short sale. So I pulled that up, and I see the seller's disclosure, which says that it is in a floodplain, but she's lived there for 30 years and she's never, it's never flooded. That's just a statement. And I'm like, okay, well, she does look kind of far off the water. I mean, it's possible it could flood, but she's saying it hasn't flooded in 30 years. Anyway, so I'm bidding on this house. I let it go to another investor, I assume, and my highest bid was like $78,000 on it. Hubzu allows you to check a box that says that they can hold your bid as a backup offer. And you can choose the length of time. Sometimes you can go as low as, I think, 5 days and as high as like 25 days. Whenever I put in an offer on these online websites and they ask you that question, well, can we hold it as a backup? I always put yes. Why not, right? Whatever the situation is, if the buyer doesn't work out, then hypothetically they're going to come back to you first. Well, so that's that side of that story. Third end is I'm on HUD Home Store, and I'm gonna circle back here in a minute, but I'm on HUDHomestore.com, which is basically the FHA foreclosure website for all the houses they've foreclosed on and taken back. I am a HUD listing broker, and one of the things that the question often comes up, like, should I get my real estate license? Well, there is some restrictions you're going to encounter, because as a broker for HUD, like, I'm listing their foreclosed homes, I am restricted from buying any of them. But needless to say, I'm on the website, I'm looking at properties, and I find one also in my area that I like to buy in at a great price. And I'm thinking, well, I can't buy it, but I know somebody who could. Again, finding deals in your spare time. I'm not saying I'm buying that one, but so I ended up a few days later showing it to this particular investor. We submitted an offer. The offer did not get accepted, but we'll put closure on that little story. Back to the first two offers I submitted that day. I was in a situation where I'm communicating with this broker for this house for $110,000 that I offered $85,000 on. He comes back to me, he goes, yeah, the seller counters you at $100,000. I'm like, okay, knocked it down $10,000. I'm like, let me go take a look at this point, because I haven't even seen the property. So I schedule an appointment, get out there, look through it. I see it needs enough work where I need to stick to my guns at the $85,000 offer. I let the broker know that. I was like, hey, I'm not really willing to pay anything more than my original offer of $85,000. But I was like, if the seller was willing to finance the deal, because I could see he did not have a mortgage on it anymore, so it was owned free and clear, I said I'd be willing to put down 10% and pay $100,000 for it. So I said my counter is 10% down, seller financed at current mortgage rates over a 30-year amortization with a 2-year balloon is what I suggested, which means I would have to refinance that property within 2 years and get him paid off. So he'd just be waiting a little bit longer for the money that he expects, but he'd be getting the price he wanted. So I tried negotiating that through. In the end, we never actually came to an agreement. The seller was not interested in working with seller financing with only 10% down. I was not interested in putting up as much cash as he was asking for. But, again, the intention is that I was trying to make deals happen in my spare time. Circle back to this channel front property that I offered on via online website through hubzu.com. And ironically enough, at my son's baseball practice over the weekend, and I get an email as I'm standing there in the dugout, and I see that they have kicked out the initial offer, and they came back to me as the backup bid at $78,000. And I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. They actually sent over the contract, and they're like, ready to go, sign off on it. You got 48 hours. So within that 48-hour period, which was this last weekend, I I ended up driving out to the property, checking it out, doing a quick inspection, looking at the problems. I did determine that there was mold in present and previously in the property. I couldn't really determine where it was from. All in all, I went back to that little channel that I was kind of excited about to see that, there'd be like essentially a waterfront property and maybe would add some value and some tenant value there. And I realized that it was like a swamp. Like there was no way that boats were getting out of this thing. I mean, maybe there's a possibility to clean it up, but I could see that there was trees down blocking access. Like it wasn't happening. So that one I as well kicked out. So I just wanted to bring up a point that I spent about an hour or so on the computer that afternoon last week. That procured 3 potential opportunities, one of which I could have had if I made the decision to, but I backed out on, which was the waterfront property. Another one which I also could have had at a price that I wasn't so comfortable with, which is why I didn't go with it. But I tried to, renegotiate it and do a seller finance deal. It didn't work out. And then the third one I turned into a possible sale for one of my investors, which again did not get accepted, but he is currently in a stage where he's sitting as a backup bid on that as well. So you never know. HUD Home Store may come back to us and say, hey, we'll take your offer now, or here's what our counter is, et cetera, et cetera. More to follow on that on HUD Home Store Works. If you have any questions on, how you can learn more about making offers on properties like this in your spare time, finding some deals, please feel free to reach out to me, joe@tannisgroupllc.com, joe@tannisgroupllc.com. And again, the intention of the podcast was just to kind of bring that information forward. So if you're frustrated, start doing some homework, start investigating, start playing around online, start playing with the Google machine. And I guarantee you, if you put some time into it, you'll be able to find opportunities and maybe even secure some opportunities before you've even seen some of these properties, which I think is what's awesome about, what the internet provides us. So I didn't have to look at any houses. I only went and looked at them after I had a potential offer accepted. Like I said, all of them I was not interested in after I viewed them, but I enjoyed looking at the properties, inspecting them, figuring out what work it needed, running numbers. I mean, that's what kind of drives me as an investor. So anyway, this is the Investor Empowerment Series radio show, episode number 58. Thanks for your time. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Investor Empowerment Series radio show. Be sure to tune in next week for another empowering episode. We welcome your feedback, so please rate us on iTunes and Stitcher, and visit us at www.investorempowermentchicago.com or tannisgrouprealty.com.